Street gangs have been marking off turf in Chicago for years. A decade ago, gangs, for the most part anyway, were black, operating on the west and south sides. Today, police say that Latinos make up 98% of the gangs in neighborhoods on the west and north side. And we want to emphasize that you should use discretion, parents, in allowing children to view this report. Some viewers may find certain scenes objectionable because of their violent nature. Russ Ewing has been covering this story about street gangs for more than a decade, and he's here now with the first part in his series on Chicago street gangs. Russ?
Chuck, street gangs in Hispanic areas have been fighting among themselves, and as a result, the police have declared war on the law-breaking elements in those gangs. We began watching this about 4 months ago, and in this series, we'll present the problem and some possible solutions. Again, some scenes in the first segment may be frightening to young children, so again, we advise parents to consider that. But we were looking for the facts, and we found them distressing. Most of these inscriptions and drawings were put here by gang members. About 15 known street gangs have been marking off their territory on the north and west sides of Chicago for years, mainly in Spanish-speaking neighborhoods. In some places, it's hard to find a building which has not been defaced, and some homeowners are afraid to paint over it. This is a part of street gang activity which we have all seen. But there's another more vicious dimension to gang activity which most of us have not seen. And we could not tell the true story of street gangs without showing it. The 4 young men you have just seen and 32 more were murdered here in Chicago in the past 120 days. Police called it a gang war.
They operate in a lot of the same ways as in the Capone days. They roll by in their cars and they shoot from their cars and take off.
It became so violent that Chicago's newly elected mayor called on police officials to crack down on law-breaking street gangs. Beefed up patrols and harassment of known street gang members reduced the number of killings, but after a while, the violence began all over again. This teenager, whose name we agreed not to use, was gunned down inside a hallway. He was a known gang member. It happened again on April 23rd. 20-year-old Ralph Negron and his 17-year-old brother Isaac were shot to death a block from their home. And the names go on and on.
Yeah.
Examine how gang activity has affected some local businesses, and we'll try to probe into the mind of a teenager caught up in gang activity.
Russ, do the police have any idea why the violence started 120 days ago with the figure that you used?
I think the weather caused it. The weather was getting better. Police don't really know what's going on out there. They're trying to just stop what's going on now, and it's kind of hard to do.
Okay, thank you, Russ. We look forward to tomorrow's report.
Well, street gangs have been carving up territory in Chicago for a long time. A decade ago, gangs, for the most part, were black, operating on the west and south sides. Today, police say that Latinos make up 98% of the gangs in neighborhoods on the west and north side. Now, Russ Ewing has been covering gang stories for years here, and he's here now with part 1 and a series of special reports. Russ?
Jim, the predominantly Spanish-speaking gangs began fighting among themselves early this spring, and we have been watching that for about 4 months. In this series, we'll show what has happened and we'll suggest possible solutions. Now, some of the scenes in tonight's segment may be frightening to young children, and parents should be aware of that. But we were looking for the facts, and we found them to be almost tragic. Tomorrow we'll take a look at the gang's effect on local businesses, and we'll try to talk with a gang member who wouldn't talk very much.
Okay, thank you, Russ.
When you ask a member of one of Chicago's street gangs why he is in a gang, the answer that you get over and over again is because it's a status symbol. You're somebody when you're in a gang. Russ Ewing is familiar with that answer. He is also familiar with the terror that a gang can bring to a neighborhood. And he joins us again this afternoon with part 2 in his series on Chicago street gangs. Russ?
Chuck, it appears that police may be winning their war against Hispanic street gangs. The violence dropped off a little bit this week, but businessmen and property owners in gang territory are not winning. They have lost millions. The outbreak of gang violence has caused some businessmen to close their stores early and go home before dark. They're simply afraid. And others say they like to see policemen in their neighborhoods at night. But policemen cannot be everywhere. They could not help the Rodriguez family. 42-year-old Armando Rodriguez would not appear on camera. He too was afraid. Gang members practically destroyed his house with fire bombs. Their reason? 2 teenagers living here refused to join their gang, and the family moved out during the night. Another resident of this community said that the reason behind their fear is real. He said that some gang members have such strong beliefs that they are willing to die in the name of their organization. We found that incredible, but true. Reporter Rich Samuels interviewed a gang member who had just been shot in the face by a rival gang. Despite his suffering, he was still defiant.
If your mother tells you to get out of this gang, would you listen to her and do what she said?
I doubt it. Castillo didn't take his mother's advice. A day after his release from the hospital, he was on the street again, boasting that he is a gang member.
The kings are lords, the masters of us, killers, and that's the way it is.
You sound like you're high on something right now. Come on, talk to me.
All right, I'm talking.
Are you high on something?
Nope.
Well, how can you believe that you can go buy a sweater and become important as a result of that?
With this sweater, they want it. I'm not saying. This sweater, they don't want me to talk. My people don't want me to talk.
Although it's apparent that he is not aware of it, Castillo is the real gang victim, and there are so many others like him. Tomorrow we'll show a gang which made a deal with a drug pusher.
Okay, thank you, Russ. We'll be looking forward to that.
Coming up next tonight, we have part 3 of Russ Ewing's series on Chicago street gangs, and today we're going to take a look at the Humboldt Park riot and its aftermath. It's been 2 years now since the riots in Humboldt Park, and in that time, Latinos will tell you that not too much has changed for them. Russ Ewing tonight is going to take a look back at how the things were at that time, 2 years ago. He's also going to take a look at how the situation is now in part 3 of his series on Chicago street gangs. Russ?
Chuck, the Latinos were right. Not much has changed in Hispanic communities in the past 2 years, and in some locations, conditions are even worse. But a close look at some activities there reveals why conditions are worse. The city got a sample of Hispanic unrest June 4th, 1977. One youth was killed and scores were injured in a full-scale riot in Humboldt Park. The anger was apparently directed at what is sometimes called the system or the establishment: policemen, city hall, politicians, and even the press. Police reports indicated that the violence was started by known gang members, and others simply joined in. But after the riots, individual gangs returned to their neighborhoods and began fighting among themselves. And we discovered that some of the older gang members used their gang connections for profit. That profit came from drugs. We taped this operation with a hidden camera. The man seen here kept a drug supply in a garbage can, and he sold to customers in automobiles in full view of everyone. A gang member told us that the peddler supplied them with drugs, and in return, they chased other pushers out of the neighborhood. police confirmed the drug connection. Official reports indicated that in about 80% of the homicides involving street gangs, either the offenders or the victims were involved with drugs. But the killings and the retaliation which always follows has been over symbols. The gang's symbols painted on walls, or the gang's letters on sweaters or T-shirts. They consider capturing a T-shirt from a rival gang member as a mark of honor. Do you agree that gang banging is stupid?
Yes, I agree. It's stupid.
But you do it.
But I do it, but it's stupid. It's stupid enough to do. You can
We
put
might
it that
come
way.
here next week and you'll be laying up in the morgue.
No, not the kid. No. No.
While we were taping this series, we met a few hundred Hispanic teenagers, and the majority of them were disgusted at what a few are doing. The question is, can they override that hardcore gang element? Tomorrow, we'll see some adult victims of gang violence. Chuck?
Okay, thank you, Russ.
Thank you, Russ.
2 years after the Humboldt Park riots, there still haven't been many substantive changes for Latinos, and street gang violence continues. Russ Ewing looks at what led to the unrest back then and the current situation in Chicago street gangs, Part 3. Russ?
Yeah, it's true that there hasn't been much change in Latino communities over the past 2 years, and in some other locations, the situation is even worse. But there are reasons for all that, and a close look reveals why.
No. Not the kid. No. No.
We met a few hundred Latino teenagers while we were taping this series, and a vast majority of them were disgusted at what a few of them are doing. The question is, can they override this hardcore gang element? Tomorrow, some unlikely adult gang victims. Chuck?
Okay, we'll look forward to that report, Russ. Thank you. Police tonight are investigating the possibility of street gang involvement in the shooting murder of a 16-year-old North Side boy, now identified as James Norales. He was apparently in a vacant lot when 3 boys pulled up on bicycles and then they shot him. Gangs use their violence and their terror against each other, but it rarely stops there. Many times, innocent people are caught in the middle of the gunfire. Russ Ewing takes a look tonight at those innocent victims as he continues Part 4 on his series on street gangs.
Chuck,
Russ?
tonight we have the tragic story of 2 senior citizens shot down by street gangs, and a look at how gang members deceive reporters. Most of those who live where gangs operate were reluctant to appear on camera, but they said the innocent suffer most.
I think it's disgusting the way they can get a hold of the guns and then, you know, they're caught and they're not even, you know, they're not even corrected for the crime they did.
73-year-old Mrs. Mary Kessler was shot to death a year and a half ago. There was a gang shooting, and she was on her way home from a grocery store, hit by a stray bullet. 75-year-old Steve Mort was lucky. He was caught in crossfire between 2 gangs. A bullet passed within inches of his heart, but he survived.
Right up there.
Here's number 3. Danny, give me your helmet. There's number 4.
Gang members would not admit that they are a threat to innocent people. In several interviews, different groups tried to convince us that they are a positive force in their community. They bragged about their manhood, and one said, "Manhood is all we have." They were proud of this teenager because he survived a shooting, and police took 6 guns away from him in 1 year. But finally, one gang leader admitted that they were only kidding. He said that they consider it fun to deceive police and reporters. A month ago, 3 kids were shot. 2 of them died, the Negron brothers over on the
Yeah, right.
Now, when something like that happens, don't you have some feeling toward the people involved in that?
What I heard from the Negron brothers, they weren't in no gang. This was, the ones who got shot, they weren't in no gang. That was what you call an accidental shooting.
Accidental shooting?
Yeah, they was in the way of the bullets. Around here, right now, we don't have no guns. And if anything, I'll admit, we do use baseball bats once in a while, if needed. We may even use a blade or so. But guns, we're trying to cease fire. That's what's going on right now, cease fire.
Now, about 90% of what you just told me in the past 5 minutes is a bunch of bull, isn't it? Isn't it now? You're just putting on a show for me because I got a camera here, aren't you?
No, half of it. But the thing is, we can't be...
Half, 90%, how much? How much was bull?
20%.
Okay. See, I was out on the street asking people like you questions before you were born, probably.
Yeah.
And I can figure out bull when I hear it very easily.
Right.
Now, half of it was bull, wasn't it?
Not half of it. Thing is, we can't...
How much?
We can't be frank with you because this is going to be publicized, and if it is publicized, we can't tell you where we're getting our guns from,
Well,
if
then you
anything.
just admitted that some of it's bull.
Right.
Haven't you?
Some of it is.
How much?
20%.
Just 20%?
Yeah.
Okay. That young man was representative of the gang members that we met while we were taping this series. Tomorrow we'll take a look at changing attitudes and some possible solutions. Jim and Chuck.
Okay, Russ, it's obvious you're on to him. A 19-year-old was forced to kneel before he was shot in a street gang dispute today. Juan Vargas is in fair condition at St. Elizabeth Hospital. Vargas told police that he was approached by some members of a Latino gang at the corner of Western and Potomac Avenue. Vargas said that the gang members put a gun to his head, told him to kneel, and then they shot him twice in the abdomen and in the arm. In another incident, a 15-year-old boy, Robert Aguilar, was critically wounded in the head this morning, shot in the head while standing on a street corner with several friends on the city's southwest side. Aguilar is in intensive care at the University of Illinois Hospital. Russ Ewing is all too familiar with that kind of street gang violence. He has been covering Chicago street gang activities for more than a decade now. And he's here tonight with some observations on then and now. This in the conclusion of his extremely interesting and provocative week-long series of special reports on the Chicago street gang situation. Russ?
Chuck, we found one of our 10-year-old films on street gangs, and teenagers then had the same attitudes they have today. And some began to turn away from street gangs when they looked at the facts. Young adults living where street gangs operate know of the dangers, but they insist on taking a chance. Many are saying the same things today that their predecessors said a decade ago. Well, last night you got shot. If you had been killed, 3 days from now they could have been digging a hole, putting you in the ground. You're just lucky. Now what about it?
Well, you know, it's always a time for somebody to die, you know.
But don't you know if you shoot somebody you might go to jail?
Yeah, everybody know that. They shot him? They're not in jail.
Right on. You might not even get convicted at all. Because a lot of cases just gets thrown out of court. You might not even get convicted. You might even get a chance to walk the streets again.
If we kill off each other, the white people ain't got nothing to worry about, you know. So that's really stupid, going around shooting each other.
It is stupid in a way, killing each other, you know.
There shouldn't be none of this Latinos against Latinos.
But when a man gets killed because of some spray paint on a wall, isn't that stupid? Isn't that really stupid? Come on now. The Latin community and the authorities have not solved the street gang problem in 10 years, and we can't solve it in 10 minutes. But officials have learned lessons from the past. The giveaway programs where gangs control the funds have failed, and at best, some administrators of those programs became rich, and the gangs became powerful and vicious. The most urgent need is for better education, job training, and jobs after the training. Some neighborhood facilities may ease the problem, but most of the responsibility should be in the home. Parents must do more than simply bring children into the world. The police should be allowed to control the immediate problem by whatever means necessary within the law, and federal government should beef up its war against drugs. There are some gang members, however, who are destined to end up as hardcore criminals, and officials can't do much about that. But the thousands of innocent teenagers on the fringe of the gangs must be given a chance to fight their way out of poverty and ignorance without being murdered on the street. Jim and Chuck?
Excellent series, I want to tell you. You mentioned some things there that we should do in order to curb the gang problems. Is there anything that we shouldn't do, that we're doing now, that we should...
We shouldn't publicize them too much. We shouldn't praise them. We shouldn't put money into the gangs. We should cut them down whenever they need to be cut down.
Okay. Thank you, Russ.
Thank you, Russ.
Russ Ewing has been looking at the problems of Chicago street gangs in a series of special reports this week, and tonight he draws the conclusion that these gangs are just a symptom of a real problem, the attitudes of ghetto teenagers. Russ?
Jim, we found one of our 10-year-old films on street gangs, and teens then had the same attitudes they have today. But some of them began to show signs of turning away from gangs when they looked at the facts. If you had been killed, 3 days from now, they could have been digging a hole, putting you in the ground. You're just lucky. Now, what about it?
Well, you know, it's always a time for somebody to die, you know.
The Latin community and the authorities have not solved the gang problem in 10 years, and we can't solve it here in 10 minutes. But officials have learned lessons from the past. Giveaway programs where gangs control the funds don't work. At best, over the years, administrators of these programs became rich and the gangs became more vicious. The urgent need is for better education, for job training, and for jobs after the training. But most of the responsibility should be in the home. Parents should try to do more than simply have children. They should control those children. The Chicago Police Department is doing all it can within the law, but the federal government should beef up its war on drugs. But no matter what the authorities do, there are some gang members who will grow up to be hardcore criminals. But the thousands of innocent teenagers who are forced to live in gang territory must be given a chance to fight their way out of poverty and ignorance without being murdered on the street. Chuck?
Okay, that was an excellent job, Russ. And I'll tell you, that last scene is so graphic, it tells it all. That young boy sticking that gun in his pants. Really something.